Hello everyone, my name is Roya, and these are the worst books that I read in 2021. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the worst overall, mostly that they're the most disappointing, but a couple of them are truly the worst. I know a lot of people don't like that some people post their best and worst of the year lists before it's actually the end of the year, but I promise you, I know that none of the books that I have planned for the coming week or so that is left of the year are going to make this list. The worst books of the year have to be pretty disappointing and pretty bad, basically. And it's been quite some time since I last even read, even like made this type of list before. Because most years I don't feel like I read as that many books that are clearly the best or clearly the worst, but this was definitely a year that I did. So anyway, on to the books. This is numbered 4 through 1, 4 being the least bad and 1 being the worst. So anyway, coming in at number 4, Spindles End by Robin McKinley. This is also the only book on this list that I actually finished the entire thing of all the way to the end and didn't quit almost to the end or anything like that. Basically, this is honestly not that bad of a book, really. And especially since Robin McKinley is a pretty good author, and this book did have a clever take on the whole Sleeping Beauty trope, kind of like the whole Sleeping Beauty tale, in that basically for instance, the fairies give this baby all these gifts, like, oh, she'll have the best voice and stuff, and then it turns out when she grows up, it turns out she's completely tone deaf, so it doesn't matter that she has the best voice. Or like, she'll make the best needlepoint or whatever, and then she just thinks needlepoint is stupid, so no one ever sees her do needlepoint anyway. Or like, she'll have beautiful golden hair, and like she just cuts off all her hair anyway because that's just how she likes it better, and so no one ever sees that she has beautiful golden hair and stuff like that. So it's definitely really interesting that way. It was definitely a good take on the story, all of that. But overall, there was no character depth. The whole book, up until like the very end almost, takes place just in like of this girl growing up in this town where she doesn't know she's a princess, and like it has nothing to do with anything. Like nothing actually happens in this book. The actual like anything happens in the last couple of chapters, and so it felt like a little bit of a letdown. And with there just being no character depth, and I didn't end up caring about the story like at all. And then with how little character depth there was, basically at the very end, the main character gets together with somebody and confesses, they confess their love and they end up together. And like up until that point, she had no love interest in the book, and there had been no subtext between these two characters at all. So what could have been a really good pairing and all that stuff ended up being very lackluster because they had no personality, no depth, no interactions where it seemed like they could get together, nothing at all. So it was just nothing between these two characters whatsoever, no sparks at all, and then suddenly like, oh, you know what, I'm in love with you. Oh, really? I'm in love with you too. And it just felt so flat, and I was like, really? Come on. So the whole book was a huge letdown, and it was hella boring, and it made me really sad. So anyway, coming in at number 3, we have Riders by Veronica Rossi. This is a YA book about a boy who finds out that he's like the incarnation of death, the horseman of the apocalypse, all that stuff. And so it could have been a really cool book. It started out kind of interesting, but ultimately it was so boring, lacked character depth. There were a couple of lines in it that felt to me like military propaganda, and so in a YA book that made me feel a tad uncomfortable. I mean, I'm sure that wasn't like the intent, but it really came across just weird to me. Like in an adult book, I wouldn't have that much of a problem with that, but in a YA book, I was like, are you sure about that? Like, I don't know, it just seemed weird to me. So I was not a fan of this book. I skipped the last couple chapters because I was just so bored. And coming in at number 2, we have Geist by whoever the frick it's by. I don't even know. So anyway, this is an adult fantasy book about basically people who are pretty much nuns who are fighting monsters, and it sounded really cool, but the whole book read as if it's almost like it read like a first draft where stuff got introduced that like wasn't gone back through the amount of the book that had already been written and like introduced earlier or anything like that. So there were like types of monsters that didn't show up until halfway through the book, and suddenly there would be this whole info dump on what it was, when like that could have found its way into the narrative earlier, so it wouldn't be like an info dump on it, basically, if you know what I mean. And it wasn't just stuff like that, it was also things like the main character is married and she ends up falling in love with somebody halfway through the book, and pretty much at that time that she falls in love with somebody halfway through the book, it's like suddenly everyone knows about how her marriage is a sham and she's not really in love with her husband and blah blah blah, when that was not what we saw when her husband shows up at the beginning of the book. Like they were clearly in love at that point. So so it was like it was just changed, like I don't know. So it was almost like it was changed halfway through the book and not gone back and corrected. And so it basically felt to me like basically the husband, since he's only in the beginning of the book, he could totally have just been like her best friend or something like that, or just a love interest. Like he didn't have to be her husband necessarily. There was no reason why. So it basically read to me like it was just there to be a cheating subplot. And so that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And especially since this is a fantasy book, there's literally no reason why monogamy has to be a thing. So it really bothers me when in literally a fantasy book, somebody who's married falls in love with somebody else and it's treated like a bad thing. Like, it's a freaking fantasy book. Just make them polyamorous. It doesn't matter. So it just really bothered me. It felt really lazy to me. The whole book felt lazy, and I just could not stand that shit. And coming in at number 1, I think you guys probably know where this is going. The Catswold Portal. I really did not like this book. I think I actually stopped reading it more like before the halfway point. But basically it's about a girl who is a princess but she had her memories erased, and it's just really, really odd. This whole thing, it makes no sense. So there were parts where people, like the villains and such, suddenly knew something without that having them find out, and the main character doesn't wonder why they knew that or anything. And so the whole thing just felt like lazy writing, lazy storytelling, and it's literally like shoved down our throats how beautiful the main character is. All we hear about is like that she looks like a supermodel and that she's so beautiful and she's so thin and blah blah blah. And then even when she turns into a cat for a good chunk of the book, she's a beautiful calico cat, the most beautiful cat anyone's ever seen. And I was like, are you fucking serious? And so I just wanted to like throw this book across the room. I was really excited to read about cat people and cat shapeshifters and all this stuff, but I did not want to hear about some chick who's the most beautiful girl anyone's ever seen. So those are the worst books that I read in 2021. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what your thoughts are, and I will see you guys very soon with a new video. Bye.